Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Unlock the Value of Data Discovery Using Knowledge Graphs and Hybrid AI webinar. We are very excited to have you here. We have a couple of amazing speakers today. I'll introduce myself and introduce our speakers. My name is Nav Chakravarthi. I am an executive client partner with Early Information Science, and I spent the last 11 years running knowledge management products at Oracle. And prior to that, I was co-founder and CTO of Inquira, the leading knowledge management product that software product that we sold to Oracle in 2011. And so I've been in that space for over 20 years. And then with us, we have Seth Early. Now, Seth is an expert with 20 plus years of experience in knowledge strategy. He has worked with a multitude of Fortune 1000 companies and helping them achieve higher levels of operating performance. And really what he's done is some amazing work around findability, usability, and making information more valuable through an integrated enterprise architecture. He's a very sought after speaker, writer, and influencer. He recently authored, you see the graphic there, the AI powered enterprise, and that's been very well received. And also he was named by Thinkers 360 as one of the top 50 global thought leaders and influencers in artificial intelligence. So it's great to have Seth here. And
thank you.
Christophe Aubry here with Expert AI has also been in the knowledge management space for multiple decades, the last 20 years. And he's responsible for market strategy of Expert AI, especially in the information industry and life sciences markets. And he's a strategic technology leader who's delivered solutions to solve customer pain points. And he's worked with major clients in the media, information services, publishing, life sciences, and public sector organizations. So very happy to thank you, Christophe and Seth, for being here. And with that, we will get into the webinar. A little bit about early information science. We're a professional services firm doing consulting around knowledge management and information architectures and AI. We were founded in 1994. We're headquartered in Boston, and we're a very rapidly growing firm. And what we bring to the table are proven methodologies to organize information and data. And to put it in a nutshell, what we do is we help companies implement information architecture to sell more product, service customers more efficiently, and innovate faster. And we've worked with a multitude of companies in the Fortune 1000, I think over 25% of the Fortune 100. And we've had a lot of success in multiple industries. And if you'd like to learn more about what we do, we have a podcast in particular on AI, and you get insight, expertise, and random commentary on artificial intelligence and machine learning. We've had recent episodes with Hendrik Hahn, who's the Chief Digital Officer of Evonik, and Jim Ayub, who's the Chief Customer Officer at eTech Global Services. So let me see if I can click on the chat. So Sharon has been kind enough to put a link to the AI podcast home on the chat. So please click on it and you will be directed. You can listen to it on your favorite podcast platform. Christophe, if you could introduce Expert.ai.
Sure. Thank you, Nav, and hi, everyone. Expert AI has been focused on natural language understanding since day one. We have more than 20 years of experience in the development of an AI platform that is dedicated to what we call the transformation of language data, textual information, into knowledge. The demand for our platform increases with the growing volumes in the variety of content that is available in the enterprise, but also finds multiple applications thanks to its ability to quickly adapt to specialized domain. You see on the right that we have been recognized in the industry across markets from information services to financial services, insurance, healthcare, and others. We highlighted some of the benefits that our clients see in our technology. We're also very pleased to maintain an ecosystem of select partners, such as with Early Information Science.
Thank you, Christophe. Really appreciate it. So before we get into the core of the presentation, I want to send a thanks out to our media partners, CMS Wire and Marketing AI Institute. We are recording. You probably saw that link up there. And it's going to be a 50-minute session plus about 10 minutes for Q&A, so please stick around. And we have polls, not too many polls, I think just 2 or 3, just to keep it interactive. So we really value your input. So we'd like to know where you stand on a variety of areas. So we're looking forward to that. And with that, let me get into the agenda. So we'll talk a little bit about hybrid AI, what it is, how it combines machine learning and natural language, and then about information architecture, why it's important, and how knowledge graphs and information architecture work with each other. And Seth will cover those 2 topics, and then we'll go into real-world examples and business impact. Christoph will talk about what expert.ai can do with some real-world examples. And one thing I wanted to highlight is that we have a sign-up session, sign-up opportunity for Ask the Experts. So Christoph and I are making ourselves available to you, right, at no charge. 20-minute session. There's going to be a Calendly link. I'll talk about it at the end, towards the end before the Q&A, but I wanted to kind of preview it. So it's a great opportunity for you to sign up. We have a limited number of slots, so I encourage you to stay at least at that point and sign up, and you can get to ask us questions. You know, we've got a lot of experience in this space that we can bring to bear. And then we'll go into Q&A. With that, we are here for our first poll, and the question is, and you'll see the poll come up, at what stage are you in your AI investments? And you know, have you not started? Are you exploring? Do you have proofs of concept in place? Do you have small trial deployments, or are you fully operationalized? Now, with AI, we obviously, you know, my guess is fully operationalized across the enterprise. There's going to be very few companies that have done that, but I expect at least departmentally, it's been in place, at least in some organizations. So we are very curious as to, we'd like to know where things stand. Sharon, do we have enough responses on that?
I liken this to the popcorn popping. When you see results continuing and then it slows down, and then by the time you smell it burning, I think you're gonna stop. Right. I think we're probably good. I see no more popcorn popping.
Yeah, you don't distract me, Seth. I'm worried. I'm trying to smell if something's in the microwave now. No. So yeah, so like we expected, you know, about 33%. I mean, a third haven't started, and you know, so over half haven't started or exploring, which is kind of what we expect. And then people are doing proofs of concept and there's trial deployments, and yeah, fully operationalized. So this is kind of what we expect, right? So I think, you know, with AI initiatives, it's really, really important to get your data and information architecture in place before you start on any major initiative. And I think that would be a good lead-in to Seth. So Seth, please take it and enthrall us, please.
Sure. So, you know, I've talked a lot about the need for reference architectures when it comes to any type of AI initiative. Years ago, I wrote an article called "There's No AI Without IA." And the core premise of that was like 2015, was that you absolutely need to tell the algorithm what's important, you know, to the organization. You can go to the next slide. And so when you start thinking about but people are now popularizing this concept. They're calling it hybrid AI. I've always thought of it as something that's necessary to make AI successful, but it's taking machine learning algorithms that are statistical. In other words, they look at large amounts of data. They look for patterns in that data, but it's also combining that with knowledge. And the knowledge is represented as entities and facts. And people call this symbolic AI, right? The knowledge representation is called symbolic AI. You can just click through this, but again, machine learning looks for patterns in the data. Knowledge provides the context. So AI does require contextualization. We always need to say, well, these are our products. These are our services. These are our solutions. Here's what our customers look like. Here are the attributes of those customers. Here are the things that are important to the organization. Here's the content. And so when we do this, we actually build the information architecture, the isness and aboutness of all of our content and our data, right? This applies to structured and unstructured. And what this does is when we go back 1 second. So what this does is allows us to build out the information architecture in the form of a knowledge graph. And I'm going to talk about and give you examples of the knowledge graph in a little bit. But again, think of it this way. AI requires contextualization. I'll give you a quick example. We had a customer who was dealing with a large amount of data around product information, products coming off an assembly line. And when they had a defective product, the question was, machine learning could handle that without a reference architecture. You give it enough examples of bad products or defective products, and you can use visual tools to recognize and show when you have good products and when you have bad products, when you have defective and you have perfect. But once you identify that, well, what do you do with that information? What product line was it? What manufacturing process? Who are the vendors? What are the processes? Who owns that process? All of that takes that machine learning data and then contextualize it so you can act on it. And that's what this is about. This is about acting on that data and deriving meaningful insights from the data. And again, the knowledge graph gives us that reference point so that we can understand what is in, especially unstructured data, our dark data. You can go to the next slide. And we'll get into a little bit more of that. But what's interesting is people are starting to take this, and hype it even more, right? You can click through one more time here. The question is, when this is an article that came from a New Scientist magazine, which is a very credible resource. And they say a new way to make machine minds that really think like us. And that is not true. They don't think like us. The human brain is vastly more complex than anything we can do. I've talked about the biological nature of this. There's 100 neurotransmitters. They're all analog, not binary. One neuron can connect to 10,000 others. There's a level of complexity that's unimaginable. But the point here is this allows us to simulate that interpretation, simulate the textual interpretation and derive some kind of meaning that the system can act upon. But again, don't take it too far, right? Don't believe the hype that says, hybrid AI is now the new thing, and now it's going to let us get to. Yes, it's valuable, but it's always been part of text analytics. You can go to the next slide. The point here is that when we think about hybrid AI, what we're doing is we're giving the reference point as a language model. We're providing a language model. We're saying, here are the entities that are important. When we did this work for Applied Materials a number of years back, which made it into a Harvard Business Review article, recently their Best of HBR archive edition, saved the company $50 million per year. But it was extracting and identifying the important features of that content to do things like protect intellectual property, to enable security and export controls, to be able to extract the knowledge, understand what products that knowledge related to, understand the concepts. We built, I think, 20 plus taxonomies to be able to do this. But these are all long-time applications for content and text analytics. It helps us identify structure. It helps us identify patterns. And it helps us do these types of things, extract the knowledge, take that dark data, that unstructured information, and find the nuggets of value in that. Doing things like, everything from mitigating compliance risks, looking for information in contracts that might not be readily available, training virtual assistants, building question answering system. All of these things require the ability to analyze text and to analyze language. And what we want to do is give the system the vocabularies and the ontologies, and I'll describe those in just a moment. I don't want to get ahead of myself, to make this work, right? Because it doesn't work without understanding context. And that's what we have to do. We have to build out the vocabularies that tell the system what is important to us. You can go to the next slide. So let's talk about information architecture. Click again, if you would. So information architecture, and this is just an abridged version. We have a much longer version. We actually review this with people, but it always starts, information architecture always starts with identification of a problem, of a business problem, of a problem space, right? And it's also driven by use cases. When it comes to AI, this is no different. We want to understand the problem. We want to build the use cases. We want to understand who it impacts and how it impacts the organization, including things that are very measurable. We need to build our baselines so we can know what success looks like. And then when we do this, what we want to do is understand what those users need in the context of those use cases, what content, what data, what information those users need as they're going about their day-to-day tasks, because we can measure the value of that content. We can identify that content and surface that content. We can do things like personalization. But the whole point here is we build the organizing principles based on the content and based on the data, but because it's not just a matter of building, a grand galactic Uber taxonomy, it's about building things that are very specific to your use cases. A lot of times these things fail because we don't have that clearly defined business problem. We don't have those baseline metrics. We don't understand exactly what we need for those users. And I like to say you can't automate what you don't. You can't automate a mess, and you can't automate what you don't understand, right? So understanding those processes and use cases, impact on users, metrics, exactly what information people need. And again, then we can build things like taxonomies and information architecture. But it always starts with these core processes. So now we'll get into what some of these things mean and define more of these terms. So taxonomies are really the building block. They're the starting point. This tells us, well, what are our products? What are the product categories? What are the different types of products we have? What are the product attributes? What services might we have? What solutions? What do our customers look like? First-party data and customer attribute modeling is very, very important. What are those customers interested in? What types of content do we have? Now, again, I say there's multiple taxonomies in any organization. It's always that way because we need these orthogonal facets. But then what we also need to do is understand the relationships between the taxonomies. So we have services. Well, maybe we have services for solutions. We have a services vocabulary and a solutions vocabulary. We have content vocabulary and we have product categories, right? So we have content types and then we have products. Well, what's the content that relates to these products? What about customers and their interests? And what this does is it allows us to do things like personalization and contextualization. And what this is, when we build those relationships between those taxonomies, we're building the knowledge scaffolding of the organization. We're building an ontology. An ontology consists of multiple taxonomies and all of the relationships between them. You can go to the next slide. And so this is what an industrial distributor set of taxonomies might look like. You have departments and doc types and products and customers and interests and industries and processes and tasks and roles and so on. And then if we go to the next slide, we can start to think about this from other industries, right? Life sciences is going to be very different than an industrial distributor, and it's going to be different from an insurance company. Life sciences care about drugs, branded drugs, generic drugs, new molecular entities, diseases, indications, mechanisms of action, biochemical targets. An insurance company cares about risks and regions and customer types and so on. I talked a little bit about the industrial distributor. So realize that your world, your ontology describes your domain of knowledge, and that is going to vary according to industry. And it's also going to vary according to organization, because you may do the same things as your competitor. And again, people say, well, I want to standardize. Well, standardization is great for efficiency. Differentiation gives you competitive advantage. That's why stores are organized differently, even when they sell the same things, right? Think of the way you organize your information as your store and your unique personality, and understanding the customers and understanding the mental the mental models of how people go about solving their problem. And that's when you align with your taxonomies and your ontologies with that mental model. That's when customers really understand what you're doing and you can really communicate more effectively. You can go to the next slide. So this is what the ontology would look like. Now, I didn't define some of these relationships, but in a thesaurus structure, which is the taxonomy on steroids, you have things like equivalence terms, like SOW is the same as statement of work, is the same as proposal, or, ABC company is also called ABCO, whatever it might be. But then these other relationships, so hierarchical is the traditional parent-child whole part taxonomic relationship, but then the associative are things that are conceptually related. So these are things like, okay, what are the interests of a particular role, right? What are the industries that products are suitable for? What are the environments that particular industry cares about? Is it marine? And so on. So what we're doing is we're building these conceptual relationships between these elements, these entities. And if you go to the next slide, you can start to see these. Well, we're gonna talk about the knowledge graph in a moment, but you'll start to see these fleshed out. But again, we start with taxonomies that describe the domain. We build the relationships between those taxonomies. That gives us the ontology, right? The taxonomy, a number of taxonomies of those relationships becomes that knowledge scaffolding for the organization. When we have the ability to access the data, we have a knowledge graph. A knowledge graph gives us the ability to leverage the ontology as a set of organizing principles and have multiple ways of navigating between structured and unstructured information. We can go to the next slide. And again, I just stole my thunder on this. It gives us that access, right? So go to the next slide. Should have clicked through one more time. But here's the example, right? So we talked about is, this is the company is an industry, is a particular industry. In a particular industry, they have customers. The customers have roles. The roles have interests. The interests have tasks that they're interested in. There are processes that support the tasks. There are products that support the processes. And then you have an entry point in any of these areas. And you can, just like if you're on IMDb and you can look for actors have been in a particular movie, and then you can look at directors of that movie and what are the movies they've directed. And then you can look at actors in those movies, and you can play the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon, right? By looking at those relationships. So it's the same idea. It gives us limitless mechanisms to access this information once we have that scaffolding. That's why knowledge graphs are so powerful. And they provide, again, the building blocks for text analytics, because we have to tell the system through controlled vocabularies, what are the interests? What are the products? What are the customer attributes? What are the processes? What are the solutions, right? That's when we can start to extract that, when we have that reference data. You can go to the next slide. Okay, and now I have another poll. You're on mute, Nath?
I am. Thank you for telling me. Yes. Okay. So we are on to our next poll, which is about all the stuff that Seth talked about, taxonomies or ontologies. Are you actively using them? And you probably have a taxonomy, right? If you're categorizing anything, a case, a product, knowledge article, you have a taxonomy, right? Now, you may or may not have ontologies. So feel free to answer in each way. Are you actively using taxonomies in a purposeful way? Are you evaluating use cases? Are you using for internal applications, external applications, or both? So I'd be really curious to see where things stand. And like Seth talked about, they're pretty core to how you understand and display information to your internal employees and your customers.
And an external application might be product catalog. If you're doing
exactly.
Right.
It could be a support knowledge base, it could be a product catalog, right? It could be a multitude of things. It could be internally, it could be how you categorize clinical studies, for example. So,
and there are a lot of accidental taxonomies, right? There's a lot of times some people just you use what they had, or it grows organically and it's not well controlled, and maybe it needs to be improved. That would be another good poll question: is what's the quality of your taxonomies?
Yeah, that's a good point.
Managing
I would argue that most taxonomies are accidental.
Yeah.
Right, in the organizations, because you just start to do that. So let's see, do we have the results coming up?
We do.
That's good. That's great. Internal, external, a lot of internal and external. I see that, and evaluating and not actively using. So I think a much better distribution. And some of this might be open to interpretation, but like Seth, you said, most of us have taxonomies in our organizations, right? Mostly accidental, but they're there, right? So with that, we are going to get to the real world examples and business impact section. And Christoph, it's all you, so please.
Yeah, and thank you, Tess. It's a great introduction. I think we definitely live in the same world. You highlighted that what are the key steps of information architecture process, and what are the essential components such as taxonomies, ontologies, hybrid AI, are supporting successful use of basically the enterprise knowledge into AI-based applications. So I will focus my presentation on real-world example of these AI applications. So language is everywhere. It's powering business. So if you are an insurer or a bank, for instance, the language in the insurance policy or in a mortgage contains basically the commitment from a contractual standpoint that you have between you as an institution and your customers. If you're a pharmaceutical company, you look at different type of language. That's medical notes, scientific articles, patents that contain more medical insights that basically will be supportive of any new drug or treatment. And the language we see in news articles, analyst reports, and press releases that are delivered by information providers, news players, contain business insight that you need to make smarter business decisions. So the same applies to other industries. So in fact, every critical business process from medical research to customer interaction revolves around language. But language is hard, and language conveys lots of information and is often ambiguous. If you take this example taken out of any context, the news story headline most likely highlight that financial institutions closed due to bad weather. But a bit more context quickly corrects our initial understanding. In fact, the land alongside the Rhone River closed that day. So that headline was certainly very ambiguous. Currently, one can wonder, where is Ian heading right now? I'm of course referring to an article from the Tampa Bay Times that was this morning about this hurricane hitting Florida. So this ambiguity is something we have to deal with technology. And very often, just machine learning can't really deal with that or struggles to difference in the meaning of ambiguous words. So one of the central notions of any classification system is to minimize ambiguity. To put it another way, to minimize the number of buckets that a given resource can be put into, preferably to the point that you have no overlaps. So take here the example of big CAT scan, which is taken from a PubMed article. The title is voluntarily ambiguous, combining two noun phrases together, big cat and CAT scan. At Experia, we designed our NLU platform that understands the context of the concept to link it to the appropriate definition or category in a knowledge base or knowledge graph. In this example, we properly connect big cat and tiger to the appropriate definitions. Ultimately, this is a great way to bring consistency in the indexing of the article. It also allows to factorize a variety of similar concepts under the same category. For instance, the CAT scan and MRI are correctly categorized as tomography imaging categories, which is part of a broader radiology category in medicine. So that the way we leverage this information is to bring more consistency, also a more efficient search within your application. So I insisted on the ambiguity. So for us, language is really a critical asset in the enterprise. But so far, in any business process that involves language, humans have been front and center. So searching for the right document, assembling data from different sources, updating data, and so on, that's very time consuming and prone to subjectivity. The impact is that scaling these processes has been very difficult. Document handling is resource intensive, adding resources is often a challenge. So expertise is acquired slowly and is unevenly distributed. All of that is because language has been difficult for technology to handle. Words are not numbers. Machines struggle to understand the meaning of documents. This is especially the case when domain knowledge is so critical to understand specialized content. So the choice of an appropriate AI technique, I think, has introduced the notion of hybrid AI. Is key here. So if we want to be successful in how we address business problems, we have to look at different techniques. One approach does not fit all needs. So for instance, collecting multiple strategic information from, say, financial press releases can be a very challenging task for both machine learning and symbolic approaches. But so key data elements that can be presented in tables, on footnotes, or spread across different sentences and paragraphs, so are also present a lot of ambiguity. So that makes really the identification of data elements difficult. So that's why we combine techniques. So if you look at, I will not detail the pros and cons, but in machine learning, when you apply it to natural language understanding, that involves, as Seth mentioned, statistical methods to identify recurrent patterns and textual associations. The pro is that it's ideal when tons of sample data are available. It works well on simple tasks, binary decisions, for instance. It's well known also by data science teams, and basically the data annotation, even if it's cumbersome to do, it's accessible to many. On the flip side, it's very often seen as a black box. It's not explainable. It's resource consuming, and it takes many iterations to get to the point that you have a model that works well. On the other side, you have symbolic approaches that are more knowledge-based approaches that produce an outcome that is based on linguistic reasonings, conditions. So the pro is that it's very explainable. It's robust, it's very fast, and it also helps to jumpstart machine learning modeling. On the other side, it requires very often some programming skills. You heard about low code, no code, so you still have to do some programming, even if it has been simplified. And the creation of specialized knowledge bases can be seen as complex. But if you look at basically the benefits of each techniques side by side, most of the weaknesses of one can be overcome by the strengths of the other one. So that's when composite AI or hybrid AI was born, to basically combine techniques to be more successful. So it's very appealing to combine those approaches. You leverage the strengths of both machine learning and knowledge-based techniques. When they work hand in hand, machine learning can bring quick adaptability and scalability to symbolic. On the other side, symbolic is explainable. It can reach very high accuracy goals. So these hybrid scenarios prove to be very helpful in the front in the industry. And recently, when we applied that on more complex problems that we couldn't address with only one of the techniques. So this is what I will be presenting shortly to give you examples of two applications that we have been developing recently that have been solved thanks to these hybrid approaches. So let's look at some real scenarios. As an introduction, we often mention what is data discovery. Ultimately, when we transform language, which is naturally unstructured, into some data, we want to explore this data. We want to discover some insights. So data discovery is the process of uncovering relevant data insights and getting those insights to the business users who need them, when they need them. So we call that actionable intelligence. So this is the information that you can leverage to support your decision making. So the organizations struggle to drive these insights because of the nature of the unstructured language data, textual information. However, there are ways to extract unstructured information with the goal to build business intelligence landscapes, dashboards for a specific area of interest, ultimately summarizing and giving you access faster to the information you need when you need it. Let's look at the first example. In many organizations, from asset management firms to information providers or financial information providers, they are dealing with a high number of documents, articles, digital assets. So our goal is to support these organizations in making the right decision before investing in product development. So what is financial data discovery? And what are the main business challenges here? So data associates are dealing with a high number of company events. Companies are merging, being acquired, filed for bankruptcy, and they're also dealing with financial assets. So the changes in these companies or in the assets impact the data, what we call data currency, which is in the way the information is up to date. So monitoring these events is very costly, often manual intensive, and is limited by team capacities. So all in all, to scale to more key parameters of company events, financial assets, and so on, monitoring more organizations, expanding to more geography is a limiting factor to product scalability. So how AI helps in these cases, to address such a need, we create a new process for the automated identification of key parameters in document sources and the validation of asset data by subject matter experts. So basically, we combined technology and we supported the subject matter experts directly. So we connected the subject matter experts with technology in a way that is easy for them to use, even if the process underneath can be pretty complex, in order to have high quality figures. So you see some of the goals that we have been reaching, not only in terms of high quality, but also in terms of speed or efficiency gains for the subject matter experts. What is the expected solution? If you go to the next slide. So in this particular example, you see that we support the creation of financial reports as soon as the information is published. So time is of the essence when it comes to financial data. So in the coming days, we approach the end of the third quarter of the year. Lots of companies will release their quarterly results. So they are processed shortly after to retrieve key data points such as quarterly revenues or daily active users, depending on the type of organization. So these data are then compared with the results of previous quarters or estimates from financial firms. Again, time is of the essence here because the information published directly impacts the stock exchange market. So it needs to be released and compared, and analysis need to be delivered to people that will make then decisions about the investments and so on. So that's important for us to, for the companies we are working with to really retrieve these key elements, and that's not something that is an easy task. So it required a very broad approach, in order to collect the right information and to have truthful quality. So how do we proceed? After we collect content from various sources, we run it through an analysis engine for data extraction, knowledge extraction. And one can navigate within documents, review information, and so on, and prepare training sets for data modeling purposes. So these models are called knowledge models because we combine, again, machine learning techniques with a knowledge bases that really help us just starting the work. So they are regularly evolving based on human feedback. And then you run that on financial reports to extract the data elements when the reports are published. So they are then compared to estimates of financial analysts, and the comparison is made accessible to third parties. At the heart of the system, we rely on a knowledge graph. And that's something that we embedded since day one into our platform to precisely identify the key parameters from the language data. So that contains meaning of words, semantic relationships between concepts. Basically, that's an ontology of the language. The depth of the graph allows for understanding ambiguities and the creation of valuable applications. The graph is regularly extended with domain-specific knowledge, leveraging standards to normalize information. So in this application, the graph proved to be essential to distinguish different key elements of finance, like the categories of debt in this example. So that's already tied to the graph, that's tied to the application, and we leverage it in order to go faster and to be more accurate in the way we identify key elements for this financial discovery use case. A few more minutes, I will highlight another use case. As you can see, it can be applicable to different industries. Let's now switch to the medical world. So we partnered with the Harvard Medical Institute and on what we call the medical tenants. Here we are interested in a challenge that is often met by health providers, but also health insurances or pharma organizations. It revolves around the processing of medical notes for the purpose of knowledge discovery, claim processing, or fraud detection. Hospital, for instance, is looking at streamlining the invoicing of services delivered to patients. Okay, so many hospitals have no analytical view on the treatments provided to patients over a month. So it includes the reasons why patients came to the hospital, the symptoms they were suffering from, the diseases that have been identified, the services that have been provided, or the drugs that have been administered. So there's no analytical view on this information, not always, but I have to say, not that often. So not collecting further insights about the patient journey at the hospital directly affects how hospitals can effectively manage the health of the next patient. So what were the treatment administered to solve a certain problem? What was the response to a certain treatment? What were the comorbidities in the patient suffering from a certain disease, and so on and so forth. In such situation, we leverage any existing biomedical knowledge to standardize key information and then identify prominent diseases, categories, drug families, symptoms, or services. So that helps providing hospital with a high-level view on their engagement with patients. And going further in the analysis, we can then identify correlations between the patient demographics and diseases and so on. So if you look at the next diagram, so it's one of the outcomes of this solution, which is the ability to index medical notes from different point of views. So if you have access to such a dashboard, you have a quick view at the different categories of diseases, type of treatments that have been leveraged, the symptoms that were the most frequent. That's very analytical, but then you can cross the information between the different categories. So you have a first search engine with facilitated navigation, but if you look at the next diagram, we have then we go further in the analysis and we leverage our ability to identify not only the main diseases and drugs and symptoms, but also identify the relationship between patient factors, such as the age range, for instance, and diseases or symptoms. So these relations are identified thanks to linguistic capabilities. That's not just co-occurrences. So really perform a semantic analysis of medical notes to find these connections. So that starts to create very interesting knowledge for the practitioners, physicians, but also people that are managing hospitals or have to plan their resources. If we go a bit deeper, what we analyze is what we call discharge summaries. I will not go into all the details of what it is, but it's basically a complete summary of the patient journey at the hospital. That's the handover document that explains to any other healthcare professional why the patient was admitted, what happened, and all the information that they need to pick up the care of the patient quickly and effectively. But if you leverage this information for the next patient, that can be extremely helpful to go faster, to provide the right insights, maybe the correct dosages, whatever. So that's essential to really analyze these summaries. So how do we proceed here? We adapted our technology to leverage knowledge about biomedical world, and we have ways to analyze any information within the summary, the discharge summary, especially taken from these medical notes to recognize information such as demographics, conditions, symptoms. We also link them to standard terms in a nomenclature, so that information is standardized. You can link a disease to a disease category. So that helps also getting bigger signals when you start to combine weak signals at the disease level to a category of diseases. Ultimately, this process helps creating structured data from the discharge summary. If you look at the information on the next slide, you have standardized information on the right, which is what will be useful for indexing, but also to summarize the medical note through the information that will be essential for going further in analyzing some correlations. And then we not only create metadata, but information that is again standardized with the different nomenclatures and standards. If you look at the next example, basically the shortness of breath is tagged as dyspnea, which is the family of symptoms of that kind. So as you have seen in this example, there are multiple advantages in this approach to data discovery, either in the financial world or in the medical world. So this knowledge dashboard that we can create really provide with an easy access to the information assembled. There's a lot of valuable time that can be saved from experts as they review insight rather than having to read through thousands of medical reports or financial reports. And the workflows are designed in a way to keep the information up to date. You can constantly process, analyze more information, and basically present it the same way because we have standardized the output. So I think ultimately for us, the goal is to support the creation of these knowledgeable applications while providing explainable results. So it was here and give you back the mic space.
Thank you, Christophe. That was very, very insightful and helpful. I mean, two amazing applications, financial services, especially, with where the market is today. There's a lot of scrutiny on that. And then something else that's very, very important personally for all of us, which is health. So thank you for those examples. So if you're looking to get started, how do you get started on something like this? So we're offering some signups. I think Sharon's going to post those in the Zoom chat. An opportunity to engage with Christophe and I. And you should see the link in the chat. It's popping up right now. And there's a Calendly link, right? And what it's going to do is give you some slots. We've allocated some time over the next couple of weeks, 20-minute slots. There's no cost. And we'll help you kind of vet what you have in mind about business value, common use cases, what key problems we could solve, typical results, and sample timeframes. So it's a great opportunity that I think, for you to talk to both of us. And this is what it looks like. You click on the link in the chat. We've got some time next week and the week after. And
this is just for the next 2 weeks, isn't that correct?
Yeah, just next 2 weeks. That's it. So we expect the slots will fill up. So please sign up right now and just find whatever works for you. And just go ahead and we kept it in Eastern time, but Christophe's right now in Europe at a conference and I'm in LA, but next week we'll all be on Eastern time. Well, mentally I'll have to be on Eastern time and we'll go ahead and do that.
Absolutely.
So please sign up if you're interested. And as you do that, with that, I think we can go to Q&A. And feel free to put them in the Zoom or feel free to...
Here's a question. It looks like, the tool that we have in terms of expert AI is pre-populated or pre-configured with existing taxonomies and ontologies, correct? So what does an organization do to build on that? What do they need to do to kind of fine tune that?
Good question. That's true. We have embedded knowledge, and it's probably one of the things that we created first to make the core NLP platform much more efficient and knowledgeable. But it's not a black box, so we give access to our graph and can be extended. We also provide tooling so that taxonomies can be loaded and to augment the language knowledge that is accessible through the platform. So as soon as you guide your clients to build taxonomies or ontologies, these models are loaded into the platform and can be managed, modified, updated by knowledge managers, for instance, within the organization. And that really supports any other applications that combines this internal enterprise knowledge with the core knowledge of the language in order to build more specialized application in a certain domain.
And this is a related question that came up, the degree from Janine Bartlett. Hey, Janine. What's the degree of maturity today in feedback loops to detect new patterns, potential changes in the knowledge graph? So that's kind of similar, how do you fine tune it, but then how do you fine tune it on an ongoing basis? So obviously COVID-19 was not, in ontology a couple of years ago. So how do you start to find those new patterns, and what's the mechanism for that?
Yeah, so that's one of the benefits of the say machine learning in that case, that there are some potential viruses like COVID-19 was mentioned, as you said. It was not in any lexicon, it was not in any taxonomy, but it was still recognized as a virus. Okay, it was still one of the things that was detected, but this was not linked to any existing category of diseases. So as soon as we find this signal, some users have ways to come back to taxonomy design and to add this to the right category. But also there are some suggestions made by the system. So again, it's recognized, It's just a matter of who decides to feed the knowledge base again with this information in order to have it recognized once for all.
Yeah, and it's a really interesting question because it doesn't know what it doesn't know, right? And so you do need some human judgment to kind of surface some of those things and identify emerging topics. And the same thing goes for ongoing tuning and maintenance of the taxonomies and the ontology, right? The system will give you some foundational pieces with the language models that are built, but it doesn't know exactly what your products are. It doesn't know exactly what your solutions are. It doesn't know your world. And again, as I mentioned before, standardization provides efficiency, but differentiation is competitive advantage. So you still want to be able to fine tune your interpretation of your content using your terminology, your processes, and really what becomes the soul of your business, right? When you start building these things out, it's really a unique fingerprint of your organization. It's the knowledge scaffolding. And again, when you start looking at e-commerce applications or customer service applications or customer support, customer experience, all of those things require a very detailed knowledge and understanding of the customer, at a very nuanced level. And also, a way of organizing the content and the products and the information in a way that aligns with the mental model of that user, right? That's how we get to things like personalization. So it's not, there's a lot that can come out of the box in terms of pre-configured language models, but really the fine tuning is what it gives you that unique value for the organization. Let's see, here's another one following the former question. Might there be a direct feeding of the knowledge graph with the patterns discovered by machine learning? Well, some of that can happen, certainly, like when you do clustering of content, you might end up with new clusters that you did not know existed, right? And that happens with word occurrences. Sometimes there can be machine-derived taxonomies, but they have funky names, right? They're not necessarily human-friendly, right? Or they'll look for term occurrences, but you can find new patterns and discover new clusters that are about emergent topics. Do you want to add to that, Christophe?
Yeah, I think it's one of the benefits of these hybrid approaches, which is knowledge is here to support as soon as we can collect it from the enterprise. Let's leverage it as much as possible because that's extremely valuable and that can help jumpstarting any other application. But then machining comes here to basically go further, look at other new patterns that we probably were not able to code or define before. And that's thanks to that. So basically machining will identify more information, connect the dots with some of the categories you have, for instance, if in your taxonomy. And that's something that you can decide to load into your knowledge base. It can be sometimes automated, or it can be a decision made by a knowledge management person, for instance. So I think this is one of the benefits of this hybrid, which is to constantly go after new areas thanks to machine learning, while you capitalize on your enterprise knowledge and you keep that knowledge growing.
So when you start thinking about that, it is about that and ongoing review. And the question from Siva is, what's the recommended criteria to extract insights from documents? I think that comes back to the use cases. I think that comes back to the business problem. What are you looking for from those documents? What is your process? It's hard to just extract generic insights, right? What's an insight? An insight is information applied to a problem, okay, that gives you some actionable result. So we still need to come back to what is that business problem? And what is that set of use cases? And what are you trying to accomplish? Nav, did you want to add to that?
No, completely agree. So I think setting that information architecture up is critical to do that. And I think once you set that up, Christophe, if you could maybe add, what do you do? Do you seed it first and then you run the extractor? How do you do that? Or do you run the extractor as a kind of the analytics as a trial run first, and then what comes first?
Well, I mean, as Seth mentioned, so you can't disconnect the end goal with the technique you'll be using. So when you build, you want to build an application, you want to support a certain business need. So before connecting the dots, you need to look at what you would like to, what is the information you'd like to have. For instance, in the case of the medical world, we may want to connect have some signals between potential treatments and some conditions. Okay, so if that's what we want to identify, we then look at what is the existing knowledge around conditions, around symptoms, around diseases that we can leverage, but also look at how we can we detect those connections between those data elements. Okay, so that's I think the starting point for us is to first look at the use case, look at the knowledge available, and look at how we can connect those. What are the sources we'll have to analyze? Where will we find the information? And what are the ways that we can decently find this causality or connections before we build the final application. But we start with the need, and then we look at all the resources that are essential, from data sources to internal knowledge, in order to reach the goal.
Great, thank you.
And I've had a question on my end very often, probably for you, Tess, which is, and you mentioned that many of the taxonomies sometimes are designed only not helpful. So I think it comes back to this notion of why do you design a taxonomy, for what purpose? So how do you support your client base when you give them some recommendation on the best way to start and the best way to really design taxonomy for what goal?
Right. So yeah, and again, it just comes back to that methodology that allows for multiple stage gates for validation, and starting with that business context, that business problem. We have a much longer presentation around information architecture that we could go through with people, but it really is based on use cases. You know, if you look at any methodology around AI, you know, it still comes back to the solid principles around IA. You know, my article, "No AI Without IA." IA has been kind of referenced quite a bit, but become an industry catchphrase. But it is that business problem, defining it. What are those use cases? Who's impacted? What do they need to accomplish? What content and data do they need? And then we can make sure that that's organized according to multiple dimensions, right? Again, depending upon the needs of the user, how do they need to access that? What's the context? So that really is the approach that we've used very, very successfully.
Great point, Seth. Yep, business problem use cases.
I know we're right at the top of the hour here, but I had one question. Mesh is publicly available taxonomy in medical terminology. Do we have similar taxonomies for automobile manufacturing, engineering, and R&D? My assumption is there are a lot. Well, there's standards organizations. Anytime there's a standard organization, they will have terminology. The problem with standards is there's the nice thing about standards is they say there's so many to choose from. Right, that's a little bit of a joke, but the problem is, what's the standard that you're trying to, you know, there was Mesh and Medra and ICD-9, ICD-10, and RX norm and LOINC and all of these things that in the life sciences industry that have to be mapped together, and there are efforts to do that. But again, coming back to automobile manufacturing, the auto standards groups, the engineering standards groups will have those types of taxonomies and terminology. Then they're usually very large, but you have to really hone in on what's important for your use case in your organization.
Well, I think we're at the top of the hour. So we have a couple of great resources from Expert.ai and from Early Information Science. We've got, and Sharon has a link in the chat about knowledge graphs, about how knowledge is power, and unlocking the value of AI and elevating your information with let me get the chat with the information services business with AI. So, and also a life sciences example. So we thank you for your time, and please sign up, and we look forward to talking to you.